The bullet struck the wooden post inches from Samuel Ford's head, splintering aged timber across his weathered face as he dove behind the water trough outside Henderson's general store. And in that chaotic moment of gunfire and shouting, he caught sight of her for the first time, a woman unlike any he had ever seen, standing perfectly still amid the violence, her dark eyes fixed on him with an intensity that seemed to pierce straight through to his soul. Samuel pressed his back against the rough wood of the trough, his Colt revolver gripped tight in his calloused hand. The spring of 1878 had brought more than warm weather to Pinos Altos, New Mexico. A gang of outlaws had been terrorizing the silver mining town for weeks, and today they had decided to make their boldest move yet, riding straight down the main street in broad daylight, firing at anyone who dared show their face. Samuel, who had been working as a ranch hand at the Ferguson spread just outside town, had the misfortune of being in town for supplies when the shooting started. Another bullet whizzed overhead, and Samuel risked a glance around the edge of the trough. 3 men on horseback were wheeling around near the saloon, their faces covered with bandanas, their guns blazing. Townsfolk scattered like startled quail, diving into doorways and behind wagons. But the woman remained standing in the middle of the dusty street, seemingly oblivious to the danger swirling around her. She wore a simple dress that looked hand-sewn, with patterns Samuel did not recognize, and her long black hair hung in a thick braid down her back. Her skin was bronzed from the sun, and there was something in the way she held herself that spoke of dignity and strength. She was looking directly at him, and despite the chaos, despite the very real threat of getting shot, Samuel found himself unable to look away. "Get down!" he shouted at her, gesturing frantically with his free hand. "Take cover!" She tilted her head slightly, her expression unchanging. She said something then, words that flowed like water over smooth stones, sounds Samuel had never heard before in his 24 years of life. The language was beautiful and completely foreign to his ears. Before he could shout again, one of the outlaws wheeled his horse toward the woman, clearly intent on riding her down. Samuel did not think. He simply moved, launching himself from behind the trough and racing across the open street. The world seemed to slow down as he ran, every detail sharp and clear: the puff of dust from the horse's hooves, the cruel laugh of the rider, the woman's calm face as she watched Samuel approach. He reached her just in time, wrapping his arms around her waist and pulling her sideways as the horse thundered past, so close Samuel could feel the heat of the animal's body. They tumbled together into the narrow space between 2 buildings, landing in a tangle of limbs on the hard, packed earth. The woman was on top of him, her weight slight but solid, her face only inches from his. Up close, Samuel could see flecks of gold in her dark brown eyes, could smell something like sage and wood smoke on her skin. She spoke again, those same melodious, incomprehensible words, and this time there was emotion in her voice, perhaps gratitude, perhaps confusion. "Are you hurt?" Samuel asked, his voice rough. "Madam, are you all right?" She pushed herself up gracefully, extending a hand to help him rise. Samuel took it, surprised by the strength in her grip. The shooting had moved down the street now, the outlaws apparently satisfied with the terror they had spread. People were beginning to emerge from their hiding places, checking on one another, assessing the damage. The woman looked at Samuel for a long moment, then placed her hand over her heart and said a single word. "Valentina." Understanding dawned. "Your name," Samuel said, touching his own chest. Samuel Ford." He said it slowly, clearly, hoping she would understand. She repeated it, or tried to. "Samuel." The pronunciation was close enough, then she pointed to herself again. "Valentina Morales." A surname. Spanish, Samuel thought at first, but then he was not so sure. The way she spoke, the cadence of her speech, it did not sound like the Spanish he had heard from the Mexican families who lived in and around Pinos Altos. This was something else entirely. "Where are you from?" Samuel asked, knowing even as he spoke that she would not understand. He made a sweeping gesture with his hand, trying to indicate distance. "Where?" Valentina seemed to grasp his meaning. She pointed north toward the mountains and said something that sounded like a place name, though Samuel could not be certain. Then she reached into a small pouch at her waist and pulled out something small and round, a smooth stone, polished to a shine, with strange markings carved into its surface. Before Samuel could examine it more closely, a hand clapped down on his shoulder. He spun, his hand instinctively going to his revolver, then relaxed when he saw it was only Tom Henderson, the store owner, his face flushed red beneath his graying beard. "You all right, Ford?" Tom asked, his eyes flicking between Samuel and Valentina with obvious curiosity. "That was a damn fool thing you did, running out in the open like that." "Could not just watch her get trampled," Samuel replied. He turned back to Valentina, but she had stepped away, the stone disappeared back into her pouch. There was wariness in her eyes now, a guardedness that had not been there moments before. Tom noticed it too. "Who is she? Never seen her around town before." "Her name is Valentina," Samuel said. "Beyond that I do not know much. She does not speak English, some other language." "Probably one of them Indian languages," Tom said, not unkindly. "We get Apache through here sometimes, though most of them stay clear of town these days. Might be Navajo or even something from further north. Hard to say." Samuel watched as Valentina took another step back, her body tense, ready to flee. He realized how this must look to her two strange men, one of them armed, speaking in a language she did not understand. Slowly, he held up both hands, palms out, in what he hoped was a universal gesture of peace. "It is all right," he said softly. "No one is going to hurt you." Whether she understood the words or merely the tone, something in Valentina's posture relaxed slightly. She looked at Samuel, then at Tom, then back at Samuel. She said something, a question based on the rising inflection at the end. "I wish I knew what you were saying," Samuel said, frustration creeping into his voice. He turned to Tom. "Is there anyone in town who might be able to translate? Father Mendez at the church, maybe." Tom scratched his beard thoughtfully. "Might be worth a try, though I do not know that the father speaks anything but English and Spanish. Still, he has been here longer than most, might have picked up a thing or two." He looked at Valentina, his expression softening. "She looks hungry, Sam, thin as a rail." "When was the last time she ate, you think?" Samuel had been so focused on the immediate danger, on those incomprehensible words and those mesmerizing eyes, that he had not really looked at Valentina as a whole person. Now he did, and he saw that Tom was right. She was too thin, her dress hanging loose on her frame, her cheekbones sharp beneath her skin. There were smudges of dirt on her face and hands, and her feet, he noticed with a shock, were bare and cut as though she had been walking for a long time over rough ground. "Come with me," Samuel said, gesturing toward Henderson's store. "Food. You need food." He mimed eating, bringing his hand to his mouth. Valentina's eyes brightened with understanding. She nodded just once, and Samuel felt an absurd surge of triumph at this small communication. He led the way into the store, acutely aware of her following close behind, Tom bringing up the rear. Inside, the store smelled of coffee and leather and dried tobacco. Rows of shelves held everything from canned goods to farming implements to bolts of cloth. A handful of other townspeople were inside, talking in low voices about the shooting, but they fell silent when they saw Valentina. Samuel tried to ignore the stares. He went to the counter where Tom kept fresh bread and cheese, pointing to them and then to Valentina. "Please," he said to Tom. "Put it on my account." Tom waved a hand dismissively. "No charge for this, Sam. Any woman in her condition needs a meal. I am happy to provide it." He wrapped a generous hunk of bread and a thick slice of cheese in brown paper and handed it to Valentina. She took it with both hands, bowing her head slightly in a gesture that seemed formal, ritualistic almost. Then she spoke, several words strung together, and though Samuel did not understand them, he knew gratitude when he heard it. Valentina did not wait for permission. She tore into the bread with undisguised hunger, eating quickly but not sloppily, maintaining a certain grace even in her desperation. Samuel watched her, a strange feeling blooming in his chest. Who was this woman? Where had she come from? And why did he feel so drawn to her, this stranger whose words he could not understand? As if sensing his gaze, Valentina looked up from her meal and met his eyes. She said something, soft and earnest, and Samuel found himself wishing more than anything that he could understand her. "I am going to help you," he said, knowing she would not comprehend but needing to say it anyway. "I do not know how yet, but I am going to help you." Something in Valentina's expression changed then, softened. She reached out and touched his hand where it rested on the counter, just the lightest brush of her fingers against his skin. It lasted only a second, but Samuel felt it like a brand, warm and electric. Tom cleared his throat. "Father Mendez will be at the church this time of day. Want me to close up shop and walk over there with you?" Samuel nodded, not trusting his voice. The next hour passed in a blur. They walked through the still nervous streets of Pinos Altos, Valentina between the two men, finishing her bread and cheese as they went. Several people called out questions. Who was she? Where had she come from? Was she one of the Apache who had been raiding further south? But Samuel ignored them all. The church was a small adobe structure at the far end of town, its simple wooden cross reaching toward the cloudless blue sky. Father Mendez, a portly man in his 50s with kind eyes and thinning hair, was tending to the small garden beside the building when they arrived. "Samuel, Tom," he greeted them, wiping dirt from his hands. "I heard about the trouble in town. Thank God no one was seriously hurt." His gaze fell on Valentina and his eyebrows rose. "And who is this?" "That is what we are hoping you can help us figure out, Father," Tom said. "She does not speak English, and Sam here risked his neck saving her from those outlaws. We were hoping you might recognize her language, maybe help translate." Father Mendez approached Valentina slowly, offering her a gentle smile. He said something in Spanish, a simple greeting. Valentina responded, but not in Spanish. She used the same flowing, unfamiliar language she had been speaking all along. The priest's expression grew thoughtful. He tried again, this time in what Samuel guessed was Latin based on the church services he had occasionally attended. Still nothing but incomprehension from Valentina. "I am sorry," Father Mendez said, turning back to Samuel and Tom. "I do not recognize the language. It is definitely not Spanish or any dialect thereof. Not Latin, of course. It could be one of the indigenous languages. There are so many in this region, and I confess my knowledge is limited." He looked at Valentina with sympathy. "Where did you find her?" "She found me, more like," Samuel said. "Or we found each other. She was standing in the middle of the street during the shooting, calm as you please. I pulled her out of the way before one of those bastards could run her down." He paused. "Father, she is in trouble. I can feel it. She is hungry, exhausted, and she is alone. I want to help her, but I do not know where to start." Father Mendez nodded slowly. "The Lord works in mysterious ways, Samuel. Perhaps he put you in that street at that moment for a reason." He turned to Valentina and spoke slowly. using simple gestures along with his words. "You are safe here." Whether she understood or not was unclear, but Valentina seemed to sense the goodwill radiating from the priest. She bowed her head again in that formal way and spoke what sounded like a blessing or a prayer. "She can stay here at the church for tonight," Father Mendez offered. "I have a small room in the back where travelers sometimes lodge. It is not much, but it is clean and safe. Tomorrow, we can try to figure out more about where she came from and what she needs." Samuel felt a strange reluctance to leave Valentina, even in the care of the kindly priest, but he also knew he had few other options. His own lodgings were in the bunkhouse at the Ferguson Ranch, hardly appropriate for a woman, and he could not afford a room at the boarding house. "Thank you, Father," Samuel said. He turned to Valentina, trying to think of how to communicate that she would be staying here. He pointed to the church, then to her, then made a sleeping gesture with his hands against his cheek. Valentina watched his pantomime, then smiled. It was the first real smile Samuel had seen from her, and it transformed her face, making her beauty suddenly, painfully evident. She nodded and said something, then pointed to Samuel and raised her eyebrows in a clear question. "He is asking where you will be," Father Mendez interpreted, though Samuel had already understood the gist. "I think she wants to know if you will come back." "Tomorrow," Samuel said firmly, holding up one finger and pointing to the sky, trying to indicate the passage of a day. "I will come back tomorrow." Valentina repeated the gesture, holding up one finger. Then she did something that made Samuel's heart skip. She took his hand in both of hers and squeezed gently, her eyes locked on his. She spoke several words, soft and solemn, and though Samuel did not know their meaning, he felt the weight of them. "I will come back," he promised again. "You have my word." That night, lying in his narrow bunk at the ranch, Samuel could not sleep. His mind kept returning to those dark eyes, that foreign language, the feel of Valentina's hand in his. He had lived his entire life in New Mexico territory, working ranches and mines, scraping by on wages that barely kept him fed and clothed. He had never thought much about the future beyond the next paycheck, the next season. Romance had been an abstract concept, something that happened to other people in the dime novels that circulated through the bunkhouse. But something had changed today. Something fundamental had shifted in Samuel Ford's world, and he knew, with a certainty he could not explain, that his life would never be the same. The next morning, Samuel was up before dawn. He did his chores at double speed, feeding the horses and mending a section of fence that had come loose, all while the ranch foreman, a gruff man named Wallace, watched with amused confusion. "You got somewhere to be, Ford?" Wallace asked around a wad of tobacco. "Town," Samuel said shortly. "Personal business." Wallace spat a brown stream into the dirt. "Personal business, right. This have anything to do with that mysterious woman I heard about? Word travels fast around here, boy." Samuel felt his face heat. "Maybe." "Well, do not let it interfere with your work," Wallace warned, but there was no real bite to his words. "Ferguson pays you to work his ranch, not to go courting strange women in town." "I will be back before noon," Samuel promised. "I just need a few hours." He saddled his horse, a steady bay gelding named Rusty, and rode into Pino's Altos as the sun was just breaking over the eastern mountains. The town was still quiet, most people not yet stirring. Samuel went straight to the church. Father Mendez was awake, as Samuel had known he would be. The priest kept early hours, rising with the sun to pray. He greeted Samuel at the door with a knowing smile. "She is awake," he said before Samuel could ask, "and she has been asking for you, or at least, I believe that is what she has been doing. She keeps going to the door and looking out, then saying a word that sounds like your name." Samuel's pulse quickened. "Can I see her?" "Of course." Father Mendez led him through the small church to a door at the back. He knocked gently, then opened it. Valentina was standing by the single small window, looking out at the morning. She had washed, Samuel noticed, and someone, probably the priest, had given her a comb. Her long black hair was loose now, flowing down her back like a dark waterfall. When she turned and saw Samuel, her face lit up with unmistakable joy. "Samuel," she said, his name lilting and musical in her accent. "Valentina," he replied, feeling foolish and happy in equal measure. She crossed the room in quick steps and took his hands, speaking rapidly in her language. Samuel looked helplessly at Father Mendez, who shrugged. "I believe she is expressing gratitude," the priest offered, "and relief that you returned. Beyond that, I am afraid I am as lost as you are." Samuel made a decision then. He looked into Valentina's eyes and spoke slowly, carefully. "I want to understand you. I want to learn your words." He pointed to her mouth, then to his own ear. "Teach me, please." Valentina tilted her head, considering. Then she smiled again, that radiant expression that made Samuel's breath catch. She touched his chest and said, "Samuel." Then she touched her own chest. "Valentina," simple enough. Names they both knew. Then she pointed to the window and said a word. It sounded like Tsia. She repeated it slower, emphasizing each sound. "Tsia," Samuel tried. "Tsia." Valentina shook her head, gently correcting his pronunciation. "Tsia." The first sound was softer, almost like a sigh. "Tsia," Samuel tried again. This time Valentina nodded, pleased. She pointed out the window again, where the sun was now fully visible above the mountains. "Tsia," she said again, and Samuel understood. "Sun." She was teaching him the word for sun. Father Mendez watched this exchange with interest. "It seems you have found a way to communicate after all, through teaching and learning. It will be slow, but perhaps it is the only way." "Then that is what I will do," Samuel said with determination. He pointed to himself and then to Valentina, then made a gesture of two people talking. "I will learn." Over the next hour, Valentina taught Samuel a dozen words. Sky was ya, earth was nai, water was tu. She pointed to objects in the small room and named them table, chair, bed in her language, and Samuel repeated each one until she nodded her approval. It was painstaking work, and Samuel knew he was probably mangling half the pronunciations, but Valentina was a patient teacher, and he was a motivated student. When Father Mendez brought them bread and coffee for breakfast, Valentina seized the opportunity to teach Samuel more words. Bread was ba. Coffee, interestingly, was Cowboy, which sounded almost like the English word, suggesting some cultural exchange at some point in history. As they ate, Samuel tried to string together a simple phrase using the words he had learned. He pointed to the bread and said, "Ba good." It was clumsy, half English and half Valentina's language, but she understood. She laughed, a sound like bells, and nodded enthusiastically. "Good," she repeated in English, apparently recognizing the word. Then she said what Samuel assumed was good in her own language. It sounded like yash. "Yash," Samuel repeated, filing the word away in his memory. Father Mendez left them alone, sensing that his presence was unnecessary. Samuel and Valentina sat across from each other at the small table, and for the next several hours they worked to build a bridge between their worlds, one word at a time. Samuel learned that Valentina's people came from the mountains to the north, a place she called Dizil. She drew pictures in the dirt outside the church, showing him mountains and rivers and a settlement of some kind. Her people, she managed to convey through gestures and repeated words, had been attacked. She made the sound of gunfire, acted out running and hiding. Many had died. She had fled south, walking for days, until she reached Pinos Altos. The story made Samuel's blood run cold. Indian attacks were common enough in New Mexico territory, but so were attacks on Indian settlements by white men, by the army, by anyone who saw the indigenous people as obstacles to be removed. He did not know which scenario applied to Valentina's people, but either way, the result was the same: death, destruction, displacement. "You are safe here," Samuel said, knowing she probably did not understand the full sentence but hoping she would grasp the meaning. "I will not let anyone hurt you." Valentina reached across the table and placed her hand over his. She said something long and complicated, emotion thick in her voice. Samuel wished desperately that he could understand every word, but he caught the tone: gratitude, trust, and something else, something deeper. The days began to blur together in a rhythm that Samuel found both exhausting and exhilarating. He would wake before dawn, do his work at the Ferguson ranch, then ride into town every afternoon to spend time with Valentina. Father Mendez allowed her to continue staying at the church, though Samuel knew this could not be a permanent solution. The priest was a generous man, but he also answered to the diocese, and there would be questions eventually about the strange woman living in his spare room. But for now, Samuel focused on what he could control: learning Valentina's language and teaching her his own. It became clear after the first week that Valentina was learning English much faster than Samuel was learning her language. She had a gift for words, picking up vocabulary and grammar with impressive speed. Within 2 weeks, she could construct simple sentences, and within a month, she was conversing in broken but comprehensible English. Samuel's progress in her language, which he learned was called Tua, spoken by the Pueblo people of northern New Mexico, was slower. The sounds were difficult for his English-trained tongue, the grammar utterly foreign. But he persisted, driven by a desire not just to communicate, but to honor Valentina by learning her words, her culture. As Valentina's English improved, she was able to tell Samuel more about what had happened to her people. She came from a pueblo called Pasoj in the mountains north of Santa Fe. Her father had been a respected elder, her mother a skilled potter. Valentina herself had been training to be a healer, learning the properties of plants and the sacred songs that were part of her people's medicine. Then the soldiers had come. Not army regulars, Valentina explained, but a group of men calling themselves militia. They claimed the pueblo was harboring Apache raiders, though this was not true. When the pueblo leaders tried to explain, the militia opened fire. The attack came at night. Many were killed in the initial volley. Others, including Valentina's parents, died trying to defend their homes. Valentina had survived only because her father, with his dying breath, had pushed her toward the river and told her to run. She had fled into the mountains, traveling by night, hiding by day, eating whatever she could forage. It had taken her nearly 3 weeks to reach Pinos Altos, and by then she was half-starved and nearly delirious. "My family all gone," Valentina said one afternoon, tears streaming down her face as she spoke. "My home gone. I have nothing now." Samuel took her hands in his heart aching for her loss. "You have me," he said fiercely. "I know that is not the same. I know it cannot replace what you lost, but Valentina, you are not alone anymore. Do you understand? You have me." She looked at him with those dark, gold-flecked eyes, and Samuel saw his own emotions reflected there: grief, yes, but also hope. And something else, something that made his heart race and his palms sweat. "I understand," Valentina whispered. "Samuel, I understand." The moment stretched between them, charged with possibility. Samuel found himself leaning forward, drawn by an invisible force. Valentina did not pull away. Her eyes fluttered closed, her lips parted slightly, and then a knock at the door shattered the moment. Father Mendez entered, his expression apologetic but concerned. "Samuel, there are men here asking about Valentina. They say they are from the territorial governor's office investigating the incident at Pasoj." Samuel was on his feet instantly, his body moving between Valentina and the door. "What do they want with her?" "They say they are gathering testimony from survivors. They claim they want to bring the militiamen to justice." Father Mendez paused. "But Samuel, I do not trust them. Something about their manner, the way they look at her. I think you should be present when they speak to her." "Damn right I will be present," Samuel said. He turned to Valentina, who had gone pale. "It will be all right. I will be right there with you." The two men waiting in the main chapel wore suits that looked expensive and out of place in dusty Pinos Altos. One was tall and thin with a sharp face and sharper eyes. The other was shorter, stockier, with a thick mustache and a bored expression. They introduced themselves as Mr. Carson and Mr. Briggs, respectively, representatives of the territorial government. "We understand you have a survivor of the Pasoj incident staying here," Carson said to Father Mendez, though his eyes were on Valentina. "We would like to speak with her, with your permission, of course." "This is Samuel Ford," Father Mendez said, gesturing to Samuel. "He has been assisting Miss Morales, that is her name, Valentina Morales, with translating and adjusting to life here. I think it best he remain present during your interview." Carson's thin lips pressed together in displeasure, but he nodded. "Very well. Miss Morales, we have some questions about the night of the attack." What followed was an ordeal that left Samuel seething with barely contained rage. The questions started innocuously enough. What time had the attack occurred? How many attackers were there? What weapons did they carry? But then they shifted, becoming more pointed, more accusatory. "Were there Apache at the pueblo?" Carson asked, his tone suggesting he already believed the answer was yes. "No," Valentina said firmly, her English clear despite her accent. "No Apache, only my people." "Are you certain? Perhaps they were there earlier and left before the militia arrived." "No Apache," Valentina repeated, her voice harder now. "The militiamen, they lie. They say Apache there to make excuse for killing." Briggs spoke up for the first time. "Miss Morales, you must understand that this is a delicate situation. The territorial government cannot simply take the word of one survivor against the testimony of a dozen militiamen. We need proof." "Proof," Samuel interjected, unable to contain himself any longer. "What more proof do you need than a destroyed pueblo and dozens of dead people? Or do their lives not count as proof because they were Indians?" Carson's eyes narrowed. "Mr. Ford, I understand you have formed an attachment to Miss Morales, but I would advise you not to let sentiment cloud your judgment. This is a matter of territorial security." "Security," Samuel spat the word. "Is that what you call murdering innocent people in their sleep?" "Samuel," Valentina placed a hand on his arm, calming him. She turned back to Carson and Briggs. "I tell you truth. You believe or not believe I cannot control, but I know what I see. I know what happened to my family, my people. No Apache, only murder." The interview continued for another painful hour. Carson and Briggs took notes, asked more questions, promised to investigate further. But Samuel could see the truth in their eyes. They had no intention of bringing anyone to justice. The militia had powerful friends, and Valentina was just one woman, an Indian woman at that, whose word meant little in the eyes of territorial law. When the men finally left, Valentina sagged against Samuel, exhausted and emotionally drained. He wrapped his arms around her, holding her close, feeling the tremors that ran through her body. "They will do nothing," she whispered. "The men who killed my family will go free." "I know," Samuel said, because he would not lie to her. "I am sorry, Valentina. I am so damn sorry. They stood like that for a long time, wrapped in each other's arms in the quiet of the church. Father Mendez busied himself elsewhere, giving them privacy. And in that moment, Samuel realized something that should have terrified him, but instead felt right, inevitable. He was falling in love with Valentina Morales. It was madness, of course. They had known each other only a few months. They came from different worlds, spoke different languages, believed in different gods. Samuel had nothing to offer her, no wealth, no social standing, just a ranch hand's wages and a fierce determination to protect her. But when Valentina looked up at him, her eyes red from crying but filled with trust, Samuel knew that none of those obstacles mattered. Not really. What mattered was the feeling in his chest when he saw her smile, the way her voice sounded when she spoke his name, the sense that he had found something precious and rare, something worth fighting for. "Valentina," he said softly, "I need to tell you something." She pulled back slightly, looking up at him questioningly. "What you need tell me?" Samuel took a breath, gathering his courage. "I care about you, more than I should, probably, more than is wise." He struggled to find the right words, words that could convey the depth of what he felt. "In English we have a word, love. Do you know this word?" Valentina's eyes widened. "Love," she repeated. Then she said something in Tua, a word that sounded like po-wa-ha. "Po-wa-ha," Samuel repeated. "Is that the same? Does it mean love?" "Yes," Valentina said. "Po-wa-ha, love." She placed her hand over Samuel's heart, feeling it beat rapidly beneath her palm. "Samuel, I also have po-wa-ha, for you." The world seemed to stop. Samuel heard nothing but the rush of blood in his ears, saw nothing but Valentina's face turned up toward his. He cupped her cheek in his calloused hand, his thumb brushing away the last of her tears. "Valentina," he whispered. "Samuel," she answered. This time there was no interruption. Samuel lowered his head and kissed her, gentle and reverent as though she were something holy. Valentina's lips were soft and warm, and when she kissed him back, tentative at first then with growing confidence, Samuel felt something in his soul click into place, like a key turning in a lock. They broke apart slowly, reluctantly. Valentina was smiling now, really smiling, and Samuel thought he had never seen anything so beautiful. "I do not know what the future holds," Samuel said honestly. "I do not have much to give you, but if you will have me, Valentina, I swear I will spend every day trying to make you happy. I will protect you, provide for you, learn every word of your language if that is what you want. Just tell me you feel the same. Tell me I am not crazy for hoping." Valentina stopped his words with another kiss, this one more insistent. When she pulled away, she was laughing. "You talk too much, Samuel Ford. I say yes. I choose you. I choose po-wa-ha with you." Samuel picked her up and spun her around, both of them laughing now, the heaviness of the day lifting like morning fog. Father Mendez appeared in the doorway, saw them together, and smiled. "I take it this is a happy moment?" the priest asked. "The happiest," Samuel confirmed, setting Valentina back on her feet but keeping his arm around her waist. "Father, I know this is sudden, but I would like to marry Valentina, with your blessing and hers, of course." Father Mendez looked between them, his expression thoughtful. "You are both adults, and I can see that your feelings are genuine. But Samuel, you must understand the challenges you will face. The prejudice, the hardship. Life is difficult enough in this territory without adding such complications." "I understand," Samuel said, "but I do not care. I would rather face those challenges with Valentina than spend my life without her." Valentina squeezed his hand. "I also understand," she said. "I am not afraid." The priest nodded slowly. "Very well. I will perform the ceremony, if that is what you both want. But I would suggest waiting at least a few weeks, to be certain of your feelings." "We can wait," Samuel agreed, though every fiber of his being wanted to marry Valentina that very moment. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of planning and preparation. Samuel spoke to Wallace at the ranch, explaining the situation. The foreman was skeptical but not unkind. "You are sure about this, Ford?" Wallace asked. "Taking an Indian wife, that is going to make your life harder in ways you cannot even imagine yet." "I am sure," Samuel said without hesitation. Wallace sighed. "Well, Ferguson has that old foreman's cabin sitting empty about a mile from the main house. It is not much, needs some fixing up, but if you are willing to do the work, I reckon he would let you and your wife live there, rent-free as part of your wages." Relief flooded through Samuel. "Thank you, Wallace, truly. I will fix it up real nice, you will see." "I am sure you will," Wallace said dryly. "Just make sure you still have time to do your actual job, you hear?" Samuel threw himself into preparing the cabin for Valentina. It was indeed run down, the roof leaked, the windows were cracked, the door hung crooked on its hinges. But it had good bones, and with hard work, Samuel could make it a home. He spent every spare moment working on the cabin, repairing the roof with new shingles, replacing the windows, fixing the door. He built furniture from scrap lumber, a bed frame, a table, 2 chairs. Tom Henderson donated some extra supplies from his store, and Father Mendez contributed blankets and cooking implements. Even Wallace showed up one evening with a rocking chair he said his wife no longer wanted. Valentina came to see the cabin when Samuel was nearly finished. She walked through the single room slowly, running her hands over the rough wood walls, testing the sturdiness of the furniture. Then she turned to Samuel with tears in her eyes. "Is beautiful," she said. "Samuel, you make this for me." "For us," Samuel corrected. "This is our home, Valentina. Yours and mine together." She kissed him then, there in the empty cabin, and Samuel felt a surge of pride and love so strong it was almost painful. The wedding took place on a Sunday morning in late summer, when the heat of the New Mexico sun was tempered by a cool breeze from the mountains. It was a small ceremony, just Father Mendez, Tom Henderson and his wife serving as witnesses, Wallace, and a handful of other townsfolk who had grown fond of Valentina over the past months. Valentina wore a dress that Mrs. Henderson had sewn for her, simple white cotton with embroidery around the collar and cuffs. She had woven wildflowers into her long black hair, and she looked so radiant that Samuel forgot to breathe when he saw her. Samuel wore his Sunday best, which was not much clean trousers, a white shirt, a vest that had belonged to his father. He had even trimmed his hair and shaved, wanting to look his best for this most important day. Father Mendez performed the ceremony in both English and Spanish, and at Samuel's request, he allowed Valentina to recite a traditional Tua blessing. Samuel did not understand all the words, but he understood the meaning: a prayer for prosperity, for children, for a long life together. When Father Mendez pronounced them husband and wife, Samuel kissed Valentina with all the love and hope and fierce joy he possessed. The small gathering applauded, and for a moment, Samuel forgot about all the hardship they would face, all the prejudice and difficulty. Right now, in this moment, he was simply a man who loved a woman, and she loved him in return, and that was enough. The celebration afterward was modest but heartfelt. Mrs. Henderson had baked a cake, and Tom provided bottles of beer for the men and lemonade for the ladies. People congratulated the newlyweds, shook Samuel's hand, embraced Valentina. Even the most suspicious townsfolk seemed moved by the obvious love between the couple. As the sun began to set, Samuel and Valentina said their goodbyes and rode out to the cabin, their cabin now. Samuel had borrowed a wagon and filled it with their few possessions. Valentina sat beside him on the bench, her hand in his, and Samuel thought he had never felt so content. That night, in the cabin Samuel had prepared with such care, he and Valentina began their life together as husband and wife. Samuel was gentle, attentive, mindful of Valentina's inexperience. She was brave and trusting, giving herself to him with a vulnerability that humbled Samuel to his core. Afterward, they lay together in the narrow bed, Valentina's head on Samuel's chest, his arms wrapped around her. The cabin was dark except for the moonlight streaming through the window. "Are you happy?" Samuel asked softly, stroking Valentina's hair. "Very happy," she replied, her English now fluent enough for complex thoughts. "Samuel, when I was running from Passage, I thought my life was over. I thought I had lost everything, my family, my home, my future. But then I found you, or you found me." She lifted her head to look at him. "I think maybe the spirits guided me here, guided me to you." Samuel kissed her forehead. "Then I am grateful to the spirits. And to whatever fate or fortune brought you into my life." "Teach me more English," Valentina said suddenly. "I want to learn everything. I want to speak like you speak." "Your English is already excellent," Samuel protested. "Better than my Tua, certainly." "But I want to be better," Valentina insisted. "I want to understand every word, every joke, every story. And Samuel, you must also keep learning Tua. It is important to me that you know my language, my culture, that you can speak to our children in both tongues. Our children." The words sent a thrill through Samuel. He had not allowed himself to think that far ahead, but now he let himself imagine it, a child with Valentina's eyes and his stubborn chin, learning words in two languages, belonging to two worlds. "I will," Samuel promised. "I will learn every word you teach me." And so they continued their linguistic exchange, even as husband and wife. Every evening after Samuel returned from work at the ranch, they would sit together in the cabin, Valentina teaching him Tua words and phrases while he helped her master the finer points of English grammar. Samuel learned the Tua words for love and home and family, for sunrise and harvest and prayer. He learned how to say, "You are beautiful and I am grateful, and I will always protect you." His pronunciation improved with practice, and Valentina beamed with pride every time he got a difficult phrase correct. In turn, Valentina absorbed English with remarkable speed. She read everything Samuel brought her: newspapers, books, even the labels on canned goods from Henderson's store. She practiced writing, her handwriting growing more confident with each passing week. Within a few months, she spoke English with only the slightest accent, a melodic lilt that Samuel found enchanting. Life in the cabin settled into a comfortable rhythm. Samuel worked at the ranch during the day, tending cattle and mending fences, and doing whatever Wallace asked of him. Valentina kept the cabin spotless, cooked meals that blended her Pueblo traditions with the frontier fare Samuel was accustomed to, and tended a small garden she had planted beside the cabin. She also began to gather and cultivate medicinal plants, using the knowledge she had learned from her mother and the other healers at Passage. Word spread among the ranch hands and townsfolk that Samuel Ford's wife had a gift for healing, and people began coming to her with various ailments: headaches, infected wounds, stomach troubles. Valentina treated them all with quiet competence, accepting payment in the form of eggs, flour, or whatever people could spare. Samuel watched with pride as Valentina found her place in this new world. She was no longer the frightened, starving woman he had pulled from the street. She was his wife, a healer, a woman respected in her own right, but life was not without its challenges. There were those in Pinos Altos who disapproved of the marriage, who muttered about race mixing and savages. Samuel got into more than one fistfight defending Valentina's honor, coming home with bruised knuckles and a split lip, though he always downplayed the incidents when Valentina pressed him for details. "It does not matter what they think," Samuel would say, wincing as Valentina cleaned his wounds with remarkable gentleness. "Let them talk. We know the truth of our marriage. But it matters to me that you are hurt," Valentina would reply, her voice tight with emotion. "Samuel, you cannot fight everyone who speaks badly of us. There are too many." "Then I will fight as many as I can," Samuel said stubbornly. "I will not stand by and let them insult you." Valentina cupped his face in her hands, forcing him to meet her eyes. "My brave husband, I love that you want to protect me. But the best way to prove them wrong is to live well, to be happy, to show them that our love is real and good. You understand?" Samuel did understand, though it chafed him to ignore the slurs and sneers. But for Valentina's sake, he learned to hold his temper, to walk away from confrontations before they turned violent. It was one of the hardest things he had ever done, but Valentina's approval made it worthwhile. As fall turned to winter and winter gave way to spring, Samuel and Valentina's life together deepened and strengthened. They learned each other's rhythms, each other's needs and fears and dreams. Samuel discovered that Valentina sang while she worked, soft tuba songs that filled the cabin with beauty. Valentina learned that Samuel liked to read aloud in the evenings, his deep voice stumbling occasionally over unfamiliar words. They argued sometimes, as all couples do, about money, about Samuel's long hours at the ranch, about Valentina's tendency to overwork herself with her healing practice. But they always reconciled, their love too strong to let petty disagreements drive a wedge between them. And through it all, they continued to teach each other. Samuel's tuba vocabulary expanded to the point where he could hold simple conversations, could understand most of what Valentina said when she slipped into her native tongue. Valentina's English became virtually indistinguishable from that of any American-born woman, though she never lost the slight musical quality that marked her speech as unique. One spring evening, as they sat together on the porch Samuel had built onto the cabin, watching the sun set over the distant mountains, Valentina took Samuel's hand and placed it on her belly. "Samuel," she said softly, "I have news." Samuel's heart leapt. "Are you?" "Yes," Valentina confirmed, her smile radiant. "I am with child. We are going to have a baby." Samuel let out a whoop of joy and scooped Valentina into his arms, spinning her around as he had on the day they confessed their love. "A baby! Valentina, we are going to have a baby." Carefully, Valentina laughed, though she made no move to pull away. "You must be gentle with me now." Samuel set her down immediately, his expression turning serious. "Of course. You should sit down. Should you be sitting? Are you feeling well? Do you need anything?" Valentina's laughter was like music. "Samuel, I am fine. Women have been having babies since the beginning of time. I am not made of glass." But Samuel could not help fussing over her, bringing her water and extra blankets and asking every 5 minutes if she needed anything. Valentina bore his attentions with patient amusement, recognizing them for what they were, expressions of love and excitement and a little fear. As Valentina's pregnancy progressed, Samuel found himself working even harder at the ranch, saving every spare penny for the baby's arrival. He built a cradle from smooth pine, sanding it until there was no chance of splinters. Valentina sewed tiny clothes and blankets, her hands moving with practiced skill. They discussed names endlessly. If the baby was a boy, Valentina wanted to honor Samuel's father, whose name had been Simon. Samuel agreed, though he insisted the child should also have a tuba name. If the baby was a girl, Samuel wanted to name her after Valentina's mother, who had been called Yatsine, which meant good sky in tuba. The pregnancy was not easy. Valentina suffered from sickness in the early months, and as her belly grew, she found it increasingly difficult to move around. Samuel did everything he could to make her comfortable, taking over the household chores and cooking, though his meals were nowhere near as good as Valentina's. In the late summer of 1879, just over a year after their wedding, Valentina went into labor. Samuel rode into town at breakneck speed to fetch the midwife, a capable woman named Mrs. Patterson, who had delivered half the babies in Pinot's Altos. Then he paced outside the cabin, listening to Valentina's cries of pain and feeling utterly useless. The labor lasted through the night and into the next morning. Samuel aged 10 years in those hours, imagining every possible thing that could go wrong. But when Mrs. Patterson finally emerged from the cabin, she was smiling. "You have a son, Mr. Ford, a healthy, strong boy, and your wife is tired but well. You can go in now." Samuel did not remember crossing the distance to the cabin door. Suddenly he was just inside, staring at the bed where Valentina lay exhausted but glowing, a tiny bundle in her arms. "Samuel," she said softly, "come meet your son." Samuel approached slowly, almost reverently. Valentina pulled back the blanket to reveal a small, red-faced baby with a shock of dark hair and eyes that would surely be dark like his mother's. The baby was making small, mewling sounds, his tiny fists waving in the air. "He is perfect," Samuel whispered, his voice choked with emotion. "Valentina, he is perfect. Would you like to hold him?" Valentina asked. Samuel was terrified of dropping the baby or holding him wrong, but he carefully took the small bundle from Valentina's arms. The weight of his son, was slight but significant. Samuel looked down at the tiny face and felt his heart crack open with a love so fierce it was almost painful. "Hello, Simon," Samuel said softly. "Hello, little one. I am your father, and I promise you I will do everything in my power to keep you safe and happy." He looked at Valentina. "What is his Tua name, Povey?" Valentina said. "It means flower, because he is a new bloom, a new life from the seeds of our love." "Simon Povey Ford," Samuel said, testing the full name. "It suits him." As the days turned into weeks and weeks into months, Samuel and Valentina adjusted to life as parents. Little Simon was a good baby, quiet and content, though he kept them awake more nights than Samuel cared to count. Samuel marveled at how naturally parenthood came to Valentina, how she seemed to instinctively know what the baby needed. He tried his best to help, changing nappies and walking the floor with Simon when he was fussy, singing half-remembered songs from his own childhood. True to their promise, Samuel and Valentina raised Simon with both languages. Samuel spoke to him in English, while Valentina used Tua, and the baby seemed to take it all in with his dark, curious eyes. As Simon grew and began to babble, his sounds were a mixture of both tongues, a linguistic blend that was uniquely his own. Life continued its steady rhythm. Samuel worked at the ranch. Valentina maintained her healing practice and cared for Simon, and their little family thrived. Wallace proved to be surprisingly fond of the baby, often stopping by the cabin to check on little Povey, as he called Simon. Tom Henderson and his wife became like honorary grandparents, doting on Simon and bringing him small gifts, a wooden rattle, a soft toy horse. Even Father Mendez was a frequent visitor, blessing Simon and commenting on how quickly he was growing. When Simon was nearly 2 years old, Valentina discovered she was pregnant again. This time, Samuel was slightly less frantic, having been through the experience once before. But he was no less excited, and he immediately set about expanding the cabin, adding a second room where the children could sleep. Their daughter was born in the spring of 1882, an easy birth compared to Simon's. She came into the world screaming lustily, announcing her presence with impressive volume. Valentina wanted to name her after Samuel's mother, whose name had been Sarah, and Samuel insisted on the Tua named Tsuru, meaning butterfly. Sarah Tsuru Ford was as different from her brother as night from day. Where Simon had been quiet and contemplative, Sarah was loud and energetic. She reached for everything, put everything in her mouth, and seemed determined to explore every inch of her small world. Samuel adored her, his fierce little daughter with her mother's eyes and his own stubborn determination. As the children grew, Samuel and Valentina's linguistic project expanded to include them. Both Simon and Sarah grew up truly bilingual, switching effortlessly between English and Tua, depending on which parent they were speaking to. They learned Tua songs and stories from Valentina, tales of the Pueblo and its people, of spirits and creation and the sacred connection between humans and the earth. From Samuel, they learned frontier practicality, how to work hard and be honest and stand up for what was right. But they also learned the painful reality of prejudice. When Simon was old enough to go into town, he came home one day with tears in his eyes, asking Valentina why some of the other children called him half-breed and told him he did not belong. Valentina held her son close, her own eyes shining with tears. "Some people are afraid of what they do not understand," she told him gently. "They see that you are different, that you speak two languages, that you walk in two worlds, and it scares them. But Simon, you must never be ashamed of who you are. You are the best of both your father and me. You are strong and smart and kind, and that is what matters." Samuel, listening from the doorway, felt rage burning in his chest. He wanted to go into town and confront the parents of those children, wanted to make them understand the hurt they were causing. But he remembered Valentina's words from years ago: the best way to prove them wrong was to live well, to be happy. And so he swallowed his anger and went to sit with his son. "Your mother is right," Samuel said, putting his hand on Simon's shoulder. "You have nothing to be ashamed of. In fact, I think you have something special that most people do not have. You know two languages, two ways of seeing the world. That makes you richer, not poorer." "But I wish I was just like everyone else," Simon said miserably. "I wish I did not have to be different." "I know," Samuel said. "But son, being like everyone else is overrated. Your mother is the bravest, strongest, most amazing woman I have ever known. And do you know what makes her that way? The fact that she survived when her world was destroyed, that she learned a new language and made a new life in a strange place, that she never gave up even when things were hard. That strength is in you, Simon. That courage is part of who you are. Do not wish it away." Simon thought about this for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "I will try, Papa." "That is all I ask," Samuel said, pulling his son into a hug. As the years passed, Samuel and Valentina's children grew strong and confident in their dual heritage. Simon became a skilled horseman, working alongside his father at the Ferguson Ranch when he was old enough. Sarah showed her mother's gift for healing, learning to identify medicinal plants and prepare remedies. Both children were fluent in English and Tua, and Samuel took immense pride in listening to them converse with Valentina in her native tongue. Samuel himself never stopped learning. Even after more than a decade of study, he was still discovering new Tua words and phrases. Valentina would laugh and tease him about his pronunciation, but her eyes would soften with love when he persisted, determined to master her language completely. "Why is it so important to you?" Valentina asked him one evening after he had spent an hour practicing a particularly difficult set of sounds. "Samuel, your Tua is already very good. You do not need to be perfect." "But I want to be," Samuel said. "Valentina, when I met you, you spoke words I had never heard before." Your language was like music to me, beautiful and mysterious. Learning Tua was my way of getting closer to you, of understanding not just your words but your world, your way of thinking." He took her hand. "And I never want to stop learning. Because every new word I learn is another connection to you, another thread binding us together." Valentina's eyes filled with tears. After all these years, Samuel still had the power to move her with his words. "You are a good man, Samuel Ford, a good husband, a good father. I am so grateful that I found you that day in Pino's Altos." "I am the grateful one," Samuel said. "You gave me a life I never dreamed possible, a family, a home, a purpose. Everything I am, everything I have, I owe to you." They kissed then, a gentle affirmation of the love that had sustained them through so much. Their children, now old enough to roll their eyes at their parents' displays of affection, made gagging sounds from the other room, and Samuel and Valentina broke apart laughing. As Simon approached his 18th birthday in 1897, Samuel began to think about the future. He had spent nearly 20 years working for the Ferguson Ranch, and Wallace had recently mentioned the possibility of Samuel taking over as foreman when he retired. It would mean more responsibility, but also better pay and more security for the family. Samuel discussed it with Valentina, and she encouraged him to accept. "You have earned this, Samuel. You have worked so hard for so long. It is time you were recognized for your efforts." When Samuel became foreman, the first thing he did was hire Simon on full time. Father and son worked side by side, managing the ranch hands and the cattle, and Samuel felt a deep satisfaction in passing on his knowledge and skills to his boy. Sarah, now 15, had become Valentina's apprentice in earnest, learning everything her mother could teach her about healing. Several families in Pino's Altos now sought out the Ford women when they were ill, and Valentina and Sarah had developed a reputation for their skill and kindness. Life was good. Not easy it never was in New Mexico territory, with its harsh climate and economic uncertainties, but good. Samuel and Valentina had built something real and lasting, a family and a life that honored both of their heritages. One evening in the summer of 1899, Samuel and Valentina sat on their porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. They were older now, approaching their 40s, with threads of silver beginning to show in their hair. But the love between them had not dimmed. If anything, it had grown stronger, tempered by time and trials. "You ever think about that day?" Samuel asked suddenly. "The day we met when those outlaws were shooting up the town." "I think about it often," Valentina said. "I was so lost then, so alone. I had walked for weeks, not knowing where I was going or what I would do when I got there. And then I saw you, and even though I did not know you, even though we could not speak to each other, I knew somehow that you would help me." "I knew the same thing," Samuel said. "The moment I saw you, something in my heart just knew. It sounds crazy saying it out loud." "Not crazy," Valentina said, lacing her fingers through his. "The spirits work in mysterious ways. They brought us together for a reason to build this life, to raise these children, to show that love can bridge any divide." "You taught me your language," Samuel said. "Word by word, day by day. But Valentina, you taught me so much more than that. You taught me patience and courage and what it means to truly love someone. You saved me just as much as I saved you that day." Valentina rested her head on Samuel's shoulder. "We saved each other," she said simply, "and we built something beautiful together." As the sun dipped below the horizon and the first stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Samuel thought about all the words he had learned over the years. Tua words for love and family and home, English words for hope and faith and forever. But the most important language he had learned was not Tua or English. It was the language of the heart, the unspoken understanding that flowed between him and Valentina like a river, constant and nourishing. They had started with nothing but a few words and a fierce attraction neither could explain. But from those humble beginnings, they had created a legacy children who walked proudly in two worlds, a love that had weathered every storm, and a life that honored both of their heritages. The years continued to roll by, each one bringing its own joys and challenges. Simon married a local girl named Elizabeth Carter in 1902, a kind young woman who embraced the Ford family's unique heritage. Samuel and Valentina became grandparents when Elizabeth gave birth to a daughter they named Grace Nata Ford. And Samuel discovered that being a grandfather was even more wonderful than being a father. He could spoil little Grace and then hand her back to her parents when she got fussy. And Valentina teased him mercilessly about how soft he had become in his old age. Sarah, true to her independent spirit, decided to continue her healing studies rather than rushing into marriage. She traveled to Santa Fe for a time, learning from both Western doctors and traditional healers, and when she returned to Pinos Altos, she opened a proper clinic with her mother. The Ford Women's Healing Practice became an institution in the town, and even the people who had once whispered about that Indian woman now sought out Valentina and Sarah's expertise. Samuel retired from active ranch work when he turned 50, though he remained a consultant and advisor to the new foreman. He spent his days helping Valentina with her garden, playing with his grandchildren. Two more came in quick succession after Grace, and finally, after years of diligent study, perfecting his command of the Tua language. On a warm afternoon in the spring of 1910, Samuel and Valentina celebrated their 32nd wedding anniversary. Their children and grandchildren gathered at the cabin, which Samuel had expanded and improved over the years until it was a proper house, sturdy and comfortable. There was food and laughter and music, and Samuel looked around at the faces of his family and felt a profound sense of gratitude. Later, after everyone had gone home, Samuel and Valentina walked together in the garden. Valentina's hair was completely silver now, and Samuel's beard was more gray than brown, but they moved together with the ease of long practice. Their steps matched, their hands clasped. "I have been thinking about something," Valentina said. "Something I have wanted to tell you for a long time." "What is that?" Samuel asked. Valentina stopped walking and turned to face him. In the fading light, Samuel could still see the young woman who had stood in the middle of a dusty street, calm amid chaos, speaking words he had never heard before. "When I was running from Pasoj," Valentina said slowly, "when I thought I had lost everything and wanted to give up, I prayed to the spirits. I asked them to show me a reason to keep living, to give me hope." She placed her hand over Samuel's heart. "And then I found you, or you found me. Samuel, you were the answer to that prayer. You and our life together, our children and grandchildren, all of this came from that one moment when you ran across the street to save me." Samuel felt tears prick his eyes. "I think we were meant to find each other," he said. "I think all those words I did not know, all the things I did not understand about your world, they were just waiting for us to learn them together. And we did, Valentina. We learned each other's languages, each other's hearts." "Say it in Tua," Valentina requested softly. "Tell me you love me in my language," Samuel smiled. After decades of practice, the words came easily now, flowing from his tongue with the same musical cadence Valentina used. "Na po wa ha," he said. "I love you, today, tomorrow, and for all the days that remain to us." Valentina's eyes shimmered with tears. "Na po wa ha," she replied. "My Samuel, My heart, thank you for learning my words. Thank you for loving me enough to walk in my world as I walked in yours." They stood together in the garden as night fell around them, wrapped in each other's arms, speaking softly in a mixture of English and Tua. Around them, the life they had built together flourished, their children carrying on their legacy, their grandchildren playing in the dirt where Samuel had once built a simple cabin, their love evident in every carefully tended plant and sturdy beam. The cowboy had learned her language word by word, and in doing so, he had learned the true meaning of love. It was not just about speaking the same words or coming from the same world. It was about choosing, every single day, to build a bridge between two hearts. It was about patience and persistence, and the willingness to see the world through someone else's eyes. It was about respect and honor, and a fierce determination to protect what mattered most. Samuel Ford, who had started life as a simple ranch hand with nothing to his name, had become wealthy beyond measure, not in money or property, but in love and family, and the knowledge that he had lived a life of purpose. And it all began with a woman who spoke words he had never heard before, a woman who had taught him her language and, in doing so, had taught him how to truly live. As they finally turned and walked back toward the house, Samuel thought about all the words he had learned over the years. But his favorite would always be that very first one, the one Valentina had spoken with her hand over her heart on the day they met. Her name, Valentina. In any language, it was the most beautiful word Samuel Ford had ever heard. The evening stars emerged one by one in the vast New Mexico sky, bearing witness to a love story that had transcended language and culture and prejudice. Samuel and Valentina Ford had proven that love needs no translation, that hearts can speak to each other in ways that words alone never could. And their legacy in their children, their grandchildren, and the generations yet to come would ensure that their story lived on, a testament to the power of love to bridge any divide. Inside the house, surrounded by the evidence of their shared life, Samuel pulled Valentina close one more time. He whispered words in both English and Tua, promises and endearments that had been perfected over 3 decades of love. And Valentina, who had once been a frightened refugee in a strange land, who had taught a cowboy her language word by word, smiled against her husband's chest and knew that she was finally, completely, and forever home.